Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we're taking a look at the Electrum Archive, issue number 1. This is a science fantasy role-playing game by Emil Boven, and it is also a setting for his world that he's going to be describing in this issue and in upcoming issues. I don't do a whole lot of zine reviews on this channel usually, because the zine really has to impress me, and the Electrum Archive did just that. I was very impressed by what I saw. The art, the layout, the concept is all really top-notch, so let's take a look inside. Issue 1 is just called Orin. The world is called Orin. And this is going to be a broad overview of the setting as a whole. I believe in further issues it's going to get into more detail into specific areas, but this is kind of the top-down view, getting a sense of how this whole setting works. The layout of the whole book is really pretty to look at, but it's also very usable. It's not just crazy looking where it's hard to figure out what's going on. Right at the beginning, there are 7 principles right here that give you a good overview of what's going on in this world, what sets it apart from other old school or just, role-playing game worlds that you might run into. So the world of Orin was populated a long time ago by an alien race. Humans were brought here to this world, and then those aliens disappeared, and their spaceships, which were in orbit, crashed down into the planet, leaving all sorts of ruin down there and weird artifacts and weird ships buried in the landscape, which of course can be looted kind of like a dungeon. Gold and silver are really abundant in this world, so you're not going to be using those as currency. Instead, the main currency is elder ink, which is a magical substance in liquid form left behind by these elders. You're going to want to delve into ruins and weird places to get it. You can use it to sell it, to buy other things, and you can use it as the main source for magic. The world is in a kind of post-apocalyptic state because there's been a number of major disasters that have happened recently, and the world is trying to rebuild. So there's a number of ancient merchant houses that are trying to set up trade routes and get civilization going again. There's a fungal parasite called the bone spores that's causing a lot of problems. The sunless princedoms are an insect race kingdom that's underground that could be rising up and threatening humankind. And lastly, there is a person known as the twin-souled emperor who claims they are a spirit from the realm beyond, born into human flesh and rules from the ancient city of Knoll. The book does come with this great fold-out map, really beautiful illustration. It seems to be designed primarily as a point crawl. I love how in between each of the locations it tells you exactly how long it takes to get somewhere. So this isn't to scale exactly. For example, it's 2 weeks to go from here to here, but just 3 days from here to here. The actual locations of them don't matter so much. It's more about the roads that you would travel and how long those would take. The main area that you would start in is the Electrum Sea over here, probably at Titan Port. There's a delta down here. There's a rift with the unseen wastes over here. Lots of different varieties of types of locations to visit. I do wish that map was actually present in the book somewhere, even if it was in a smaller form. It's really cool in the big fold-out map, but if you ever lost that, it would be tough to figure out where you were. There is a play example right here at the beginning, which is neat. I like it when books do this. I think it's common in a lot of Japanese role-playing games as well, where you just jump into the middle of a game. And by seeing how players might play out part of a session, you can get an intuitive sense for how the rules work, especially if you've played role-playing games before, and you get a good sense of what this game is about. It definitely has a very classic old-school D&D feel, where it's about problem-solving, investigating ruins, figuring out their tricks and traps and puzzles, and trying to get rewards out of that. But its very weird and unique setting is going to add a lot of flavor and a lot of interest instead of just your typical going through dungeons and killing dragons. Next, we're going to get into character creation and how the rules of this thing work, but first, a quick shout out to today's sponsor. This video is brought to you by Delve, a new book on Kickstarter by Bob from Bob World Builder. Delve is a 200+ page book on building and surviving dungeons. It has 10 awesome plug-and-play dungeons. It's got magic items, equipment, monsters, traps, hazards, puzzles, all of that good stuff. And it's designed for 5e and also for Shadowdark for people who want a more old-school style. Delve is a complete dungeon design toolbox, so it looks like it's a really great place to start, especially if you're new to 5e and you want to figure out what makes a great dungeon, how do I construct that. Delve's going to have everything that you need. It even includes physical cards for magic items and creatures and traps, so you can show your players exactly what they're dealing with. It's live on Kickstarter right now. Link is down in the description. Go check it out. All right, how does character creation work in the Electrum Archive? You're going to roll your attributes and hit points, roll a d4 for each of your attributes, and there are 5 of them right here. Agility, which is agility. Archive, kind of like intelligence. Body, what you would expect. Mask is an interesting blend of charisma and stealth. And then spirit, which is intuition and mental endurance. You're going to choose a background, which kind of gives you a set of skills and some bonuses to your attributes. And then you will also choose one of 3 classes, which we will look at in a minute. Some of these skills might be things like influence or politics or trade, healing, survival, and herbalism. And you also get languages. There is a limited list of languages that you could encounter in this setting. So the languages you pick is going to be mechanically relevant. I like that because it really builds the world building into the character creation. Then you just have to choose your equipment and choose a name. The equipment is slot-based. There's rules for that in just a minute. Here's the first of our 3 classes. The 3 classes are the Fixer and the Vagabond and the Warlock, basically thief, fighter, and wizard, although they have their own unique twists. The Fixer has skills: swift, expertise, backstab, network, supplies, and many pockets. When you level up, you can choose a new skill, or you can take a skill you already have and upgrade it to make it better by moving up to the mastery level of it. If you're a Vagabond, then you get maneuvers, advanced maneuvers, and trophies. Essentially, these make you more effective in combat. You can do things like command someone, shield someone, split fire, taunt, and you have a grit resource that lets you focus or shake off damage. The way that trophies work is if you defeat a creature and you take a trophy from their remains, then you'll be able to get advantages on fighting that creature as long as you're holding that trophy. But of course, it takes up slots, so you can't hold too many of them. If you're a Warlock, then you manifest powerful spells by inhaling Elder Ink and calling upon spirits from the realm beyond. So you get different spell names. The spell names are randomly generated. You have to work with the game master to figure out exactly how they work. It's essentially the system from Maze Rat. So that's really cool to see that, because that's one of my favorite Magic systems, and I love seeing that in other role-playing games. Although in Maze Rats, it's randomly determined every day, whereas in this game, they're more permanent. You actually get them set in your head, and you can cast them more consistently. So there's a bit more work you have to do with the game master to really determine how those spells work so that they're not overpowered. Normally, in order to obtain a new spell, you have to drink 50 drops of Elder Ink, which puts you out of commission for a whole day, but you get a new spell. But by the time you're at level 7, you get a new random spell that you can use that day, just for one day only, kind of like in Maze Rats. And that just happens every day by the time you're at level 7. I think level 8 or maybe 9 is the max level. I should also point out in this book that the physical construction is really nice. You know, it's staple bound zine, so it folds very flat, which is good. But also just the paper quality just feels really nice in your hand. The whole thing is just a pleasure to hold. I don't know what paper Emil is using here, but I really like it. So your standard attribute check is that you roll a d10 and you're just trying to roll under your attribute number. Advantage and disadvantage works kind of like in 5e. And you have combat, which is zone based. So you have different zones you move between. You don't have to worry about exact positioning unless I guess you really want to. You could add that in. In terms of figuring out initiative, whether you act before the enemies or after the enemies, you make a speed roll, and that's determined by the kind of weapon that you have. So big heavy weapons are going to make it so that you fight later, usually, when you make your speed roll. Attacking is similar to Into the Odd in that there's no attack roll, there's just a damage roll. Everyone just deals damage, and armor reduces that damage. If your health goes down to 0, then you roll a d6. On a 1 to 3, you're dead. On a 4 or 5, or 4 or 5 or 6, you are unconscious and dying. If someone doesn't help you, then you will be dead. If you manage to survive that, though, you will roll on here and get a scar, like maybe you have a shattered leg or you have lost an eye. When you're advancing and getting experience points, this reminds me a little bit of things like Dungeon World or Burning Wheel, where you ask some questions at the end of a session to figure out how many experience points that you get. The more treasure that you got in terms of the drops, the Elder Ink drops, you're going to roll a d4, d6, or a d8 to determine the total XP you get from that. If you complete a goal, if you learned anything useful about the world, you made a new relationship, or you survived being on death's door, those can all give you XP. But the XP is randomly determined. I'm not totally sure how I feel about that, because you could have done really well, and then you just rolled badly on this, and you get hardly any XP. Maybe another way to do that would be to have a minimum amount that you made, and then you could have a random extra bonus put on top of that. I don't know. Yeah, down here it says that the maximum level is 8. And you can't have an attribute with a base value that is lower than 1 or higher than 8, which makes sense. By the time you have like a 9 or a 10 on your attribute, then it's virtually impossible to fail anything. Equipment uses item slots. You have 10 slots, 2 for your hands, 2 for your body, and 6 backpack slots. That's really not that many slots, but the way that this works is that many items have usage dots, where they tend to have 3 usage dots. So if you're carrying like a torch, for example, that takes up 1 slot, but really it can be used 3 times. So it's kind of like having 3 torches. Same goes for a lot of other things like weapons and rations and toolkits and things like that. There's lists of items to buy here: toolkits and essentials, membrane mask, healing toolkits, and some transports like riverboats or airships. It is science fantasy, so you're not constrained to just medieval stuff. There's weird sci-fi things in there as well, which I like. Reminds me a bit of Nausicaa. That's the feeling I get from it. A variety of weapons here that are differentiated by things like how much damage that they automatically do, but also the speed that they have, so big things are slower to use, and they often have restrictions, so like a great sword requires a body score of 6 or higher. Same thing goes for armor as well. If you're a fairly weak character, you just can't wear heavier armor. It's nice that we have some weird items as well, like the Force Staff, Void Glass Blade, Moonlight Rifle. Those are nice. Spell names. You can randomly generate spells similar to my game Maze Rats. For example, you might get a Feast of the Empowering Ember because you roll on a little template here and you kind of put those words together. There's guidelines here for how what potency level a spell is going to have based on what it does. So you and your game master figure out what level it is, and that's going to tell you what the casting cost of that is going to be in drops every time you want to cast it. When you are traveling through the overworld or you are exploring a site like a dungeon, you do have a travel event or an exploration event roll that you make. It's kind of like a modified version of the hazard system from over on Necropraxis, where it takes a lot of the different things that you would often roll separately for in D&D and combines it into a single die. So in the wilderness, the die can tell you whether you have an encounter, a complicated encounter, or whether you start losing food because you weren't able to gather enough. And in a dungeon, you might have an encounter or a sign for an encounter, or you start losing light, or you start checking off marks on your torch. There's a brief timeline of the world of Orin, starting with the world being settled by the elders a long time ago, bringing humans to this planet, the era of the great cities, the trade era, and the present. There has been a big catastrophe where a huge volcano erupted, wiping out a lot of human civilization, and now everyone is struggling to get by. Here's all the different languages here. We have Iric, High, Drazigar, Nolish, Riftspeak, Lahamic script, if I'm saying that right, Void Song, and there's an interpretation roll. So there's actual language mechanics, which is very nice. So if you aren't very good at understanding someone's language, you might have to make a roll and you got the correct interpretation, or it was the opposite intended message is received, or it comes across as an insult. That's really fun. There's a lot of role-playing opportunities there. Some background on how Elder Ink works. I love these illustrations. Very Mobius inspired. So this part kind of reminds me of the way that things like ultraviolet grasslands look. That's definitely an inspiration. There is a ludography in the back of the book going through all the inspirations, and it's a kind of a who's who of lots of OSR books. Plenty of different factions from the banking system, the merchant houses. These are kind of like the rangers keeping the bad guys at bay. The mycelium consciousness, a fungal-based life form that's trying to take over the entire planet, unbeknownst to most people. I love how they all have a base that's somewhere actually on the map, and they have a goal. So if you encounter people from one of these factions, you know exactly what they want. The rest of the book mostly focuses on each of the major regions that we've seen in that overworld map and each of the sites, giving about a paragraph to each. This is very much a kind of a cursory view of the world. I enjoyed reading it quite a bit. It would be difficult, I think, to actually run the setting just using this, though, because the information is not very in-depth. For example, if you travel down to the City of Bones, which is 2 days away from Titan Port, which is probably going to be your starting location, it's a sprawling burial complex near Titan Fort, tunneled into a cliff face. Its myriad passages contain the ancestral tombs of various houses, many whose bloodlines have long since ended. The city is home to the restless dead and squatting raiders that terrorize the surrounding region. Now, there's a couple of hooks there. There's things that you can do with that, but that's all that it really gives you. You're going to have to draw maps. You're going to have to flesh out who the people are that are there and what they want and any adventures that are there. There's going to be a lot of work that's going to be involved with that. Fortunately, each of these different regions comes with a D10 table of plot hooks and 20 different encounters. So there's plenty of material here that you can draw from. I just wish that it was tied to the individual sites a bit more so that if your players go to this site, you immediately have something that you can use. So for example, you have a pack of feral rock claws has ripped through the fencing around Mursa's well and has killed most of the settlement striders. What provoked this extreme behavior? That's something you're going to have to flesh out on your own. Encounters are often pretty interesting, and if you combined 2 of them together, you could get something very interesting. So let's see, an ink-powered machine the size of a small hut, humming as it hovers through the dunes. Magic does not seem to work around it. What exactly does this machine do? It doesn't say. You're going to have to improv on top of that. But maybe you combine it with, let's see, a secluded homestead, its roof ablaze. Screams are heard from inside the house, while a handful of raiders stand gleefully outside watching the flames. Maybe there's a way you can take this machine and jury-rig it some way to distract the raiders or fight against them, giving you a chance to put out the fire. The Mural Delta is a network of rivers flowing from the Rain Wall Mountains to the east, which drain into the Azure Ocean to the west. So there's a number of different environments here, not just, desert, which is where you're going to be starting out. More plot hooks and more encounters. We have the Rift, a large canyon filled with half-buried elder ships and ink tech. The Rift is an ink seeker's paradise. So this is a place where you would have all sorts of weird mega dungeons to explore. And there isn't really an example of that here. Again, hopefully this will be fleshed out in future zines. But it would be nice to have at least one, even if it was a one-page dungeon, so that you could have something to hand out to the players and really dig into a little bit of dungeon crawling in the initial zine. There's the Ruined Lands, which is the area around the volcano, which destroyed most of human civilization. Some major locations like the ruins of Maldrazigar, which was the human capital before it was destroyed. Azar Keep, the Ember Mount itself, Sanctuary, the Clockwork Labyrinth. Lots of fun potential there. Then we have the Spirit Roads, where the veil between the realm beyond and Orin is thinnest. Lots of floating rocks. The Soul Gate, the Grove of the Sculptor, the Plain of Jars. That's really funny because by sheer coincidence, today I was reading about a place in Southeast Asia that's actually called the Plain of Jars, where there's tons of large, like 9-foot tall stone pots, which people think were used as burial sites. So it's really cool that that was incorporated here. There's the Spore Wilds. East of the sparkling dunes of the Electrum Sea lie the sprawling savannas of the Spore Wilds. The tendril-like mushroom shrub of the region is kept in check by roaming herds of grazers like the thick-skinned loghead, kind of like a hammerhead shark mixed with a cow. At the back of the book, there is a short little bestiary full of NPCs and monsters, reaction and morale systems. The monsters have very simple stat blocks where you just have their hit points and what their skill is. That's the number that you're going to try and roll under whenever they try and do anything, really, any kind of ability check, and how much damage they do. When running the game as a game master, you're just going to be reading this description, and that's going to inform how the monster acts, what kind of tactics it uses. You're just going to have to riff off of that. So an Elder Drone, for example, is a large hovering metal sphere with a bundle of rubbery flesh-like tubes hanging from their undersides. The ends of the prehensile tubes can be retracted, revealing sharp metal pincers and scalpels. Their insides are filled with ink, and the inner machinery will fetch a good price from anyone looking to buy Elder Tech. You can immediately imagine tactics that it would use, like being able to attack multiple people at the same time, and you can think of ways that it would be vulnerable because it has these rubber tubes that you could slice open with cutting weapons. In some cases, a little bit more information will be helpful, though. For example, if you kill these things for the ink inside, exactly how much ink is that? Are you going to roll randomly? Is it supposed to be a lot? It's hard to tell exactly. You could easily riff on that and make it up yourself as the game master, but I feel like that would be an easy thing to add to this book to just make things a little bit more gameable. Other monsters include ink-powered golems, living shadows, morn growlers, rubble worms, rust elementals, spore vampires, still singers. The names really give a lot of flavor and help you get into the world and into the headspace I think the author is going for. There's an NPC generator at the back here with some common Ornish names like Legion, who is a raider that harbors a dark secret, or Varen, who is a scholar that has developed a taste for human flesh. A table for looting the body, of course, and how the bone spore infection works, because that could be a problem, especially over the long term. The inspirations include things like Cairn, Mouse Ritter, Morrowind, Soldukar's Wake, Ultraviolet Grasslands, Vaults of Varn, Mothership, Noska of the Valley of the Wind, yeah, I called that one, through Ultan's Door. A lot of the really great zines from the OSR are definitely an inspiration here, and I think this is in the top tier of zines. I'm really looking forward to the second issue because I want to see how this world is developed. Oh, look, and it even calls out my game Maze Rest. That was very nice of him. So that's it for the Electrum archive. Definitely recommend checking it out if you're into science fantasy. You can, of course, use this as a base for a new campaign. You would have to expand on it a bit yourself. I know the second issue is at least in production, I believe. I think it's in pre-ordering. The PDF of the issue 1 is still available, but the print of issue 1 is, I think, sold out, and you have to pre-order it. I'll put links to where you can do that so that you can get it as soon as it comes out. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.